Now, collectively, the people are sovereign. So, the word people. The legal word for a citizen is actually person. And so, little by little, corporations have become persons in law. And persons in law can sue or be sued. Persons in law can make contracts. So the CEO of ExxonMobil can sign on behalf of an entity which is bigger than most countries. So this idea that you have the sovereignty of the people, but I think this idea of the sovereignty of the people, which is a great concept, which people died for. You know, the French Revolution was about that. The American Revolution was about that, although I think it was about other things, and we'll get to that in a moment. But once you get these corporations disguising themselves or taking on the legal personalities of persons, so Sheila's the same as ExxonMobil. And ExxonMobil wants to sue her, or you want to sue ExxonMobil, go to court, no problem. Well, I think ExxonMobil, you're not the same. And, and of course, these industrial associations, they have their lobbyists in these governments, and they can they have a lot of ways to influence public policy. So I, for one, kind of like the notion of keeping the queen. I like the notion of keeping the queen because it's something I can kind of push in the face of my American friends. And I also find it a good survival strategy in Alberta, where people say, "Oh, well, you're radical. You're not voting Alliance, and you're not boosting Ralph Klein. You're a radical." I said, "No, I'm not a radical. I'm a conservative." And to be a conservative means you appreciate the Queen, you appreciate the history and tradition that lies there. Let me demonstrate part of this right here, right now. Now, why did the Anglo-Americans in these 13 colonies, why did they rebel against King George? This is not actually King George, but it's Sir William Johnson, who's the King's representative in British North America. But it actually kind of he's obviously modeling himself on King George. I've seen editorials comparing Saddam Hussein to King George and saying, well, we have to appreciate that for us, King George was a tyrant, and we had to rise up against King George. But now, Saddam Hussein is a similar thing. What made the Anglo-Americans rebel against King George? What did King George do that was so tyrannical that it caused people to take up arms to break away from the British Empire? So the United States is, there's really this interesting sort of paradox. It has an empire now, an informal empire, an empire without a legal framework. And it comes out of the old empire, the old superpower, and the new superpower. So the United States can, in a way, say, well, we're about decolonization. We're not about building empires and colonizing people. We were created in resistance, in opposition to empire. And, there's a great mythology of the Boston Tea Party dressing up as Mohawk Indians and, throwing the tea in the Boston Harbor and saying, we're not going to pay a tax to the East India Company we're not going to pay tax to the British government, and we're not represented in Parliament. Why should we pay taxes? So no taxation without representation. But what were they going to do with those taxes? Why did they need those taxes? Well, the British imperial government had to deal with a new part of the British Empire. That part of the British Empire was called Canada. So this is, really local history. So Canada, of course, evolves in the fur trade, in the French Aboriginal fur trade. And it's interesting that they adopt an Indian word, and of course they were learning the Indian languages. It was a different kind of colonization because you had to make friends with the indigenous people. Whereas, the tobacco growers in Virginia, and why is Virginia called Virginia? Because Sir Walter Raleigh, who is Queen Elizabeth I's, one of her favorites, she gives him this charter. She entitles him to settle part of the North America, and he calls it after Queen Elizabeth. And what does he call it? He calls it Virginia. Why did the Queen of England call herself Virginia? Well, she had this fiction that she was a virgin. In fact, Queen Elizabeth used her sexuality as an instrument of state. When she took power in 1558, England was a marginal society. Spain was powerful, France was powerful, and it was just assumed that Queen Elizabeth would marry. The only question was, would she marry into the French Empire or would she marry into the Spanish Empire? And she flirted with both, and she ended up doing neither. So she played them off against each other. She did sexual politics, and she led them on. And in fact, she was building up her own society. And so the British Empire starts with her saying to her pirates, this is becoming so clear to me, and it's so interesting when you think, a lot of people